All right, welcome back to Close Up. We just heard from the incumbent in the 2nd Congressional District. Now it's the Republican challenger's turn, Jim Lawrence. This is his 2nd time running. So what makes the difference this time around, sir? How's everything going?
You know, thanks for having me, Josh. Things are going great. I'm still making my rounds through the 2nd Congressional District here in the state, and I'm proud to say that the voters are still receiving my message very, very positively.
How are you competing? I mean, in terms of funding, obviously you're overmatched, and the national committees probably look at the 2nd CD and say, that's a tough hill to climb. Maybe we should invest elsewhere.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not, paying attention to the war of the resources right now. My focus is squarely on the voters of CD2 in New Hampshire and making sure that I touch each and every voter and let them know that I'm fighting for the priorities that are important to them, dealing with our stale economy, dealing with our failed foreign policy, fighting for a solution for Social Security, and all other issues that people are worried about, concerned about, talking around their kitchen table here in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, the incumbent was just on a moment ago talking about what she sees as her successes, whether it's her work with veterans, the Agriculture Committee, the heroin crisis, saying that she's been very effective. How are you making the case that she needs to be fired?
Well, the case is very clear. I mean, we're sitting here, we now have a $19.5 trillion national debt. Congress has been inept at trying to deal with that. We're still dealing with overregulation and overtaxation of our small businesses, crippling our economy. We've had the slowest GDP growth 8-year period in the history of this country. It's definitely time for new leadership in Washington. Not to mention the fact that we have the worst foreign policy in decades. Our allies don't feel like they can count on us. Our enemies certainly don't fear us. And we have done nothing to solve the looming Social Security crisis.
Talk about that foreign policy, because one of the knocks against Donald Trump from Hillary Clinton is, oh, you can't have somebody with his temperament in charge of the nuclear codes. We'll get to him in a second, but just overall, where do you think the administration has gone wrong in terms of whether it's dealing with ISIS or Russia or the Iran nuclear deal? I know you're not a big fan of, but just the approach that the rest of the world looks at if we want to be a world leader. Well,
you just listed a whole long list of areas where I think we have a failed foreign policy. We've been ineffective at containing Russian aggression. We're now seeing signs that they're lining new missiles along the border with Poland.
So what do we do? Start there with Russia.
Well, here's the bottom line. I mean, the fact that we have a current administration that's willing to talk tough talk and not do anything about it, we saw it time and time again. We saw it in Syria. We saw it with the inability to have a proper exit strategy from Iraq without allowing ISIS to emerge. It's no wonder that world leaders around the world feel like we're a paper tiger and they could take advantage of these issues. So the first thing to do is to tighten up our foreign policy. Make sure that when we say something, we mean it and we follow through, so that we can send a strong message to the world leaders around the world that they understand that when America says something, they mean business, and they're not going to challenge us in the future. Unfortunately, that is not true right now.
Well, Donald Trump has said, he respects Vladimir Putin as a leader and that he would engage in discussions with him. Do you agree with that point? Because a lot of Republicans say this is not a guy that can be reasoned with and he's a bully.
Well, I have to be honest with you. There's a lot of things that I've seen Vladimir Putin do in recent times that give me great, I have large concerns over what he may or may not do. He's a serious threat to our national interests, and we need to treat him that way. Now's not the time to coddle him.
And when you say coddle him, you're talking about Donald Trump's friendly approach towards him as a businessman and a leader?
Yeah, I think we need to put a strong foot forward. It's very important for us to have a strong foreign policy, have a strong national defense posture. As a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, I'm very thankful that the taxpayers invested in my ability to be trained in military strategy, and it's my firm belief that now is a time for America to show strength to keep us safe around the world.
All right, let's get to Donald Trump. By now, the video that was released, well, when this airs, will be about 10 days ago. Everybody pretty much recited, unfortunately. You came out saying that you were offended by it, as a number of Republicans, but you didn't remove your support for Donald Trump. Why? For people who have questions.
Well, as I said before, no one's going to condone the statements that they made. As a parent, as a father, yes, 4 daughters, no less. What he said was horrible. I would never condone statements like that, and I don't think it's appropriate. But I'm running for Congress in CD2. There are serious issues that are facing the voters of New Hampshire. And it's unfortunate, but these things are distracting us from talking about the real issues that are important to the voters in the state. We should be talking about the $19.5 trillion national debt. We should be talking about solutions for Social Security. We should talk about the escalating cost of college tuition and the ability of our kids to get student loans. These are real issues that the voters should be hearing about.
But this election, particularly at the top, has been more about character and integrity than perhaps any other presidential race in history. And that's a lot of people think that's a fair litmus test. I mean, the role model question. Does the president have to be a role model, do you believe?
I believe the president should be a role model. I think George Washington set an excellent example for all presidents to follow, and I think that we should uphold that tradition. I think it's relevant, but I'm going to go once again. I'm running for Congress. I'm focused on my race. I'm focused on the issues that are important to the voters of New Hampshire, and that's what I think I need to pay most of my attention talking to.
Is it proving difficult? I mean, you can put it back on me and say, well, you're the one that's asking me these questions. And on the way out the door, Annie Kuster shook your hand and said, you know what, people aren't talking about how nice our race has been, cordial in those terms, at least compared to other races on this ticket. Is it difficult to run a race based on issues against a well-funded incumbent in this atmosphere?
Well, there are a lot of distractions there right now, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to move forward and keep pressing the important issues that are important to the voters. I believe that I have the right solutions to bring forward the positive changes that we need to move America forward, and I'm going to keep talking about that.
One thing that you point to a lot on the campaign trail is your service. You're in the Air Force, and thank you again for your service. We don't see the numbers of veterans running for office is dwindling. You know, whether it's the top ticket on down. Are you troubled by that? Because ultimately Congress gets to make resolutions of war. The president, you know, obviously has enormous influence over that.
Well, Josh, first I want to thank you for your service as well. But yes, I do think that that is a relevant topic for discussion because, as you know, experience matters in all things, especially in leadership in Washington. We were talking about failed foreign policy, a lack of leadership in certain critical areas like our national defense down in Washington, D.C. I think a big contributor to that is the lack of veterans being present in those positions. I think we need to really take a serious, hard look at improving the amount of veterans, the people that actually have experience with some of these issues, to be able to go down and weigh in some of these critical decisions down in Washington, D.C.
You only have about a minute to go, but when you get, let's say you're successful on Election Day, what's your top priority going to be when you do arrive in Washington, D.C. in January of 17?
Well, my top priority when I arrive in Washington, D.C., if I'm successful, will be to try and deal with this huge fiscal spending problem we have in Washington, D.C., and get our economy moving forward. I mean, we need to improve the economy for all Americans so that they can have the jobs to be able to provide for their families. That's the #1 issue.
And then that's a tall order. Everybody wants to be a change agent. I said it a few minutes ago to Annie Kuster. Why? I'm not going to ask you why you're going to be different, but have you noticed that there is a conversation going on with people who want to get down to Washington and create change, and they have some common beliefs, maybe a common thread that will allow that to happen?
Well, I do think so. And I want to add one thing about the difference between Representative Kuster and myself. There are clear distinctions between us in terms of our policies. I definitely want to cut back on overregulation of small businesses. I want to restructure taxes for small businesses to help them grow our economy. I want to take on our national debt head on. These are critical differences between Representative Kuster and myself, and I hope the voters will take note of that when they vote in November.
Best of luck to you moving forward, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Josh.
And we'll be right back with Ann Holton. Stay with us.